Governor Andy Beshear says conditions will be made worse by freezing temperatures.
We got people without power. We got people that can't heat their homes that might have power because of the damage. And we are going to have wind chills that are negative Thursday morning and are really low on Friday morning.
The Trump administration hitting the airwaves to combat illegal immigration.
If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it.
A stern warning from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in this video that's part of a new multi-million-dollar ad campaign to crack down on illegal immigration.
Follow the law and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences.
Trump administration Homeland Security officials have launched deportation operations across the country. Congressional Republicans are looking to provide the administration with $175 billion for border security. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
The judge is expected to rule today on how much access the Department of Government Efficiency can have to data at federal agencies. Jared Halpern has more from Washington.
Attorneys general from 14 Democrat-led states are asking a federal judge in D.C. to limit Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency he leads from getting access to sensitive data and firing employees at several federal agencies. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan heard arguments yesterday and plans to issue an order later today. During argument, she did question the authority of Musk, but also appeared skeptical of a request to block DOJ from the Office of Personnel Management. The Trump administration says DOJ is acting only in an advisory role, so Senate confirmation is not needed, and the states suing can't show any harm to them or to taxpayers. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Democrats accuse DOJ of breaking the law, but Oklahoma Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin says DOJ is simply doing what the president promised to do.
This is what President Trump brought to the American people. He said he was going to drain the swamp. He said he was going to get government working for the people again. He said he was going to expose the face for the fraud and abuse. He brought on the most successful CEO in our lifetime to be the consultant. Corporations all over the world always hire consultants because when they come in, they look at it from an unbiased perspective, and they just simply look at the numbers.
A member of the Senate Armed Services Committee wants to warn the American people just how dangerous a threat Communist China poses to the United States. Chad Groening has more.
Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton has drawn from his extensive intelligence and national security experience and knowledge to reveal just how deeply the Communist Chinese Party has infiltrated America. Cotton has outlined his concerns about China in his new book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China. During an appearance on Life, Liberty, and Levin on the Fox News channel, he made it clear that China wants everything.
They want to replace the United States as the world's dominant superpower, both militarily and economically. Chinese officials were pretty open about this in President Trump's first term with some of his officials whenever he was there on a state visit. They said that ultimately they want to be able to exclude the United States from the economic sphere of Asia, that they want to treat the United States like a low-cost commodity provider, that they will buy our oil and our agricultural commodities. But if we don't dance to their tune, they can get those in places like Latin America and the Middle East.
Cotton says they've been coming after us on several fronts.
That's why they've undertaken the biggest military buildup in history. That's why they've been waging an economic world war, especially against the United States, for the last several decades. That's why, as I say in 7 Things You Can't Say About China, they have vast influence operations inside of America, in our businesses, on our campuses, in our governments. They want to replace America as the world superpower.
I'm Chad Groening.
Wall Street is flirting with a record again as U.S. stock indexes drift in mixed trading. The S&P 500 virtually unchanged. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 74 points, while the Nasdaq Composite fell 0.2%. More news online at afn.net and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Thoughts of the child you were carrying keep pouring over in your mind. A deep, unrelenting sadness overshadows your days, and you wonder if you will ever feel whole again. There is hope and healing from a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline, 866-482-LIFE, and talk with someone who has been where you are. Your call is confidential, and we will help you find healing. 866-482-LIFE.
we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. It's Tuesday afternoon. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm with you Tuesdays and Thursdays. Walker with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But listen every day for an opportunity to stay up to date on what's going on out there and get that biblical perspective, but a little bit of, a strategy, a little strategery, as George W. we jokingly would say. But just thinking about how to make a difference and not just waste our time, certainly not just sit on the sideline. And I know if you're listening to this program, you're not going to do that. Just sitting on the sideline, basking in the blessings of liberty while someone else pays the price, bears the burden, does the hard work. That's not you, or you wouldn't be listening to At the Core, because here we take action. We get involved, and going to be, of course, having some very specific action plans for everyone to participate as we get closer and closer to that 250th birthday of the nation, July 4th, 2026. We want to spend 2025 laying the groundwork, rebuilding the walls, using the right bricks, the right mortar to build the walls strong for future generations. And so we're going to be helping you do that locally by getting you good information on how to get In God We Trust, the national motto at your local government entities, how to get the Ten Commandments back in your schools and at your courthouses, and all these other religious liberty opportunities, but also just educating your friends and family and neighbors, yourself. That part of the foundation has got to be laid, because there's just too much poison that has been poured into the culture over the last 40 years to think that the president can just sign that away with an executive order. No doubt, I am loving his leadership right now. I am loving the steps that he's taking to restore the country, restore the Constitution, restore the rule of law. The fact that he's using executive orders and doing them in a constitutional way, not overstepping the boundaries of what he's been empowered to do through the Constitution. We, the people, of course, doing that, and then through Congress and the laws that they've passed, giving certain authorities to the executive branch, which the president is in charge of, and that's what an executive order is all about. It's telling the executive branch what to do. It's not telling us as Americans what to do. It's telling the employees of the federal government who work for the president. I know you might say, they work for the people. Yeah, but the president is their manager. The president's in charge of the executive branch and has to make these decisions. And so one of the things the executive branch does is, unfortunately, dole out trillions and trillions of dollars, and has, not as much leeway as the president should have to stop waste and abuse. I think constitutionally has complete leeway to do that and not send checks that are fraudulent or abusive of the system or whatever. But we've got this Impoundment Act from the 70s and Nixon and all that. There's challenges to that, and we'll see where that goes. There's court challenges. There's a congressional bill that's been filed, and they're working towards repealing that and essentially making sure the president can do what Doge is working on. When Elon Musk points out $100 million being wasted here, or $2 trillion or $2 billion wasted there, that the president can run that to ground and not spend it again, not just send the check because of some archaic 70s law that was intended to stop abuse is now being used to further that abuse. And so those are all the kind of complicated in some ways, but yet simple ways that the president is turning the tide very quickly. One of the ones I want to highlight today is, this is a big one, man. This is a complete mindset shift from the Biden administration, and to be fair, from the last few months of the first Trump administration. Let's not forget that the made up by Pope Fauci and his sidekick Birx, the made up 6-foot rule, the made-up, lies about masks that aren't needed, then they're needed, and then the world's going to fall apart if you don't wear 5 of them. I mean, all of the insanity, that happened in Trump's White House. So let's just not – I'm sorry, I just have to keep reminding us of that so that you don't think I'm just a Biden basher. I'm going to bash bad policy no matter where it comes from. And so those last few months of the first Trump administration, there was some insanity going on in his own administration. I'm not sure he was for it. I think he was kind of drug kicking and screaming to a lot of those press conferences, and it was in some ways a no-win situation, though I think he could have
If he were the Trump of today, he could have put a stop to all that nonsense. But, those things had to happen, folks. That was God's way of getting us to have to go through the fire so we would be refined. But one of the things that he just did a couple days ago, and I haven't had a chance to talk about it because I think it was Friday afternoon when he did it, is this all of these schools. If you remember, these colleges were doing these absurd vaccine mandates and mask mandates and all these other COVID mandates where they basically shut down the classroom. And then if you were smart enough to say, I'm 19 years old, I'm healthy, I don't have any comorbidities, my chance of surviving COVID if I get it is, 99.9%, really better for a 19, 20-year-old that's healthy. And frankly, I'd rather have the immunity, and I don't want to take a chance on this unknown experimental mRNA, I don't even like calling it a vaccine, but you just, if you made a rational, that's just a rational decision that you would make about any medical, choice that you might have. If that was you, well, you couldn't go to class. You weren't allowed on campus. You weren't allowed to participate. You couldn't play sports. You couldn't do this. You couldn't do that. All these mandates that were forcing people to put money in Anthony Fauci's pocket, forcing people to bow to Pope Fauci and pay off his friends and himself with all of these vaccines. Kicked out of the military, you name it. All the horrific things that happened. Well, the president had already, and we talked about it here on the program, he'd already began the process of taking care of the military one. So actually saying to these folks that were kicked out of the military, not only are you welcome back, you're going to get back pay, which I think they should get the back pay and be able to be in the reserves or, anything like that and be compensated. Frankly, I think they ought to get it, get some sort of compensation even if they don't go back in at all for what happened to them. But anyway, believe it or not, it's hard for me to even think about it. It's 5 years later, folks. You realize that? It was 5 years ago in February of 2020 when all the COVID stuff started. We started hearing about it in other places. And then, by next month, March of 2020, the complete chaos has hit, and there's no sanity left in the world, it seems like. And so 5 years later, some of these schools still have COVID vaccine mandates. Can you believe that? I can't. The fact that you can't look rationally at the scientific data and come to a better conclusion than you can't come to class if you don't get the COVID vaccine tells me you're either a moron or you are so sold out to the quote-unquote expert opinion that you've created a religion out of that you do not use your faculties. You do not think. And therefore, you shouldn't be at the helm of an educational institution. You certainly shouldn't be the one that is shaping the minds of the next generation. And yet, here we are. And so the president issued an order on Friday saying no more. No more COVID vaccine mandates. And if you're doing that at your school, no federal funding. Now, I am personally of the opinion that there should be no federal funding anyway for education. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government any authority over education or any authority to even fund education in any way, let alone have mandates. And so that's where we should be ending up. And the president's working on that too. He's actually talking about, ending the Department of Education, which every president since Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education, every Republican president has said they would do that. Ronald Reagan said he would do it, didn't accomplish it. George W. Bush said he would do it, didn't accomplish it. George H.W. Bush, George W. And it just hasn't been done. No, for whatever reason, they get there, and there's just too much of an entrenchment, and there's too much, it's for the children, and all these lies. I think Trump's going to do it. I really do. I think he's going to get rid of the Department of Education. So maybe we'll get to the point where the federal government doesn't fund anything in the education sector. Now, that also means not just the Department of Education. Most of what the Department of Agriculture does is pay for school lunches. Why is the federal government paying for lunches for kids? I don't care how rich or poor you are, federal funds should not be used to pay for your lunch. There should be local churches helping to do that, local community solutions to that. That's a much better way to do it, and all the data backs me up on that. It's twice as effective when you do those kinds of things locally in the private sector, not when government does it. Government is lousy at taking care of the poor, absolutely terrible at it. actually ends up creating more of the poor, actually ends up keeping most of the money, and only 30% ends up getting to people that are in need. So government's just not the right vehicle. If you're truly compassionate, if you truly care about those kids, if you truly care about people that are in need, you should be against government involvement in that and absolutely for doing it yourself or your local church or finding a local food pantry or Meals on Wheels or whatever. But you get out there and do it yourself, not have government do it. Education's the exact same way. Get government out of it completely. So I don't think it should be involved at all. But in this particular case, the money is a weapon. And it is because it has been appropriated and it is in the hands of the president. I think he should use it to get good policy and protect the people that are supposed to be on the receiving end of these things, which are, of course, the students themselves. And so those students now being able to not have to do this COVID vaccine, being literally bribed into injecting your body with this junk. Thank you, President Trump. This is a very important executive order here, reversing these mandates and using the hammer. I mean, that's what he has to do. This is the only thing these people understand. They only understand power and money, and you have to use the power when you have it. The American people have given this power to Donald Trump. They have said to Donald Trump, clean up the mess. They've said, we want the bull in the china closet. You look at the polling data right now, it's off the charts. I mean, it's 60 plus on virtually everything that he's doing. All of these big things he's doing, 60 plus, the border, the finding the waste and cutting out the fraud, all of these big efforts, 60%, 65%, 70% of the American people are with the president on this. So this is a good thing, what he's doing to stop these mandates. Very thankful for this particular one. A couple other items from the weekend before we go to break, and then we'll get to your phone calls in the second and third break. 888-589-8840 if you'd like to call in. 888-589-8840. One thing from the weekend, this Zelensky guy, I'm sorry. I know all these Hollywood actors and actresses and politicians like Lindsey Graham just worship this guy. They think he's so cool. They think he's such a hero. I think he is a spoiled, rotten punk. I think he's a grifter. I think I am so sick and tired of this guy coming to America and guilt tripping us into writing blank checks for him. And now look, this headline, I mean, this just, you got to see this, or you got to hear this. So he has the nerve to say, let me just read. Zelensky views the offer as overly centered on American interest. This is the whole deal where President Trump's saying, hey, our government foolishly gave you $350 billion. It's probably way more than that. And we want it back. We want to be paid back. It was not just a gift, it was a loan. And so you're going to pay us back by sharing some of your, minerals, some of the valuable things that you have that you're not even using to some extent. And gave a very fair proposal on this thing. And Zelensky, quote unquote, viewed the offer as overly centered on American interest. You think? Yeah, of course it's centered on American interest. We've paid your bills for the last 4 years. Should not have been doing it, but we did. Yeah, we'd like to be paid back. Thank you very much, because we're broke. We didn't have the money to give you, should not have given it to you in the first place. And so that's such a turnoff to me. Zelensky views the offer as overly centered on American interest. Exactly right, it's centered on American interest. That's what we're supposed to be interested. That's what America First is all about, having a president that actually puts us first. So I'd say, Zelensky, either give us the minerals, give us the cash, or we're just going to come collect. It's time to send in, the Godfather or something here and say, hey, Zelensky, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. Did I just do that on the air? I think I did. I usually only do that in front of my kids. I'm sorry. I'm not Marlon Brando, but I love his character in The Godfather. And I think that's what Donald Trump should just channel The Godfather and tell Zelensky he's got an offer and he can't refuse it. He just can't, because it's the only way he's going to survive. And by the way, I mean, I think that's what people want out of Donald Trump. That's the Donald Trump we're looking for. All right, come on, guys. Let's get our money back from the Ukraine, and let's stop sending them more money. Back in a moment. Would love to hear your thoughts when we come back from the break. 888-589-8840. I'm Rick Green. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
But But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. When the prodigal son parable is discussed, the focus is usually placed on the young son who squandered his inheritance, yet returned home when he came to himself. But if you look closely at the biblical text, you'll see it actually reveals the inexhaustible love of the Father. Jesus' storytelling reveals that this was no usual earthly father. When the young son squandered all, brought shame upon himself and his family, the Father sees him from a distance, runs to him, and restores him. That is our Heavenly Father.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
The words you are about to hear are taken from letters sent in by members of the Trinity Debt Management Program.
Dear Trinity, today I'm making my final credit card payment.
Before I came to you, I was in a constant state of anxiety and panic, but now there is hope for my family's financial future.
Working with Trinity made me understand that I'm not alone.
You really do help people.
Your kindness will never be forgotten.
Without Trinity support, I would not have achieved my lifelong goal of becoming debt-free.
We saved a lot on interest and penalties, of course, but the reward was the gift of human kindness.
Trinity has carried me through a very difficult time in my life. You're amazing.
I used to feel so anxious and hopeless. Now I feel grace and peace.
God bless Trinity as you continue to help others become debt-free.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
A vacation with a purpose. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildmon, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. That's what we're calling our tours in 2025. If you're going with us, we're going to have a lot of fun, like a vacation, but it's also going to be a learning experience and a great time of fellowship with folks from all over the country who share your values, our Christian values, and respect our Christian heritage. We're going to Boston in October. We're going to Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon in June and September. Also in June and September, we're going to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. So we've got a lot planned for 2025. If you want to go with us on any of these tours, all you need to do is go to the website wildmongroup.com for all the information. WILDMON group.com, and we'd love for you to come with us.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Rick Green.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on At the Core with Walker Wildman and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with us. 888-589-8840 is the phone number. 888-589-8840. Before I head over to Ashley in Virginia, quick just update for you. We had a great Constitution Conference last Saturday in Fort Worth, Texas. Just a great opportunity to get people together, talk about the Constitution, talk about what you can do. Not only celebrate the victories that are happening in Washington, D.C., but recognize that these victories, all these executive orders, even the things Congress is now passing, all of this simply gets us the air cover we need to actually restore liberty in our communities. That's where it hits home. That's where it matters the most. And so we have these Constitution conferences around the country to talk about that, to equip people, to give them, the action steps that they need and the training that they need. If you ever want to be a part of one of those, go to patriotacademy.com and learn more. Okay, Ashley, you are up first. Thanks for calling in. What's your comment, question, insult, whatever you got? Go for it.
Hey, Rick. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I just want to say how thankful I am that our family did not cave and take those COVID shots. My son at the time was a high school football player, and there was so much pressure from the school. They did this, I remember contact tracing. They did these contact tracings where the kids had a QR code on their lunch table. And when they went to lunch, they all had to do the QR code so that if somebody, quote unquote, tested positive, then they would contact trace everybody at the table. And if they hadn't had the shot, they had to stay home from school for 2 weeks. Crazy. Symptoms or no, which means Friday night's a football game, you don't play. So all these parents were, we have to get the shots because we might get contact traced and we might have to miss a football game. We might miss school. And it was just so, controlling and such overreach. And my son, who's got a great head on his shoulders, was like, no way, Mom, I am not taking that shot.
Good
and we didn't
for
want
him.
to, none of us did. But
him.
I'm just so thankful now that we are through that. God's protected us, and we didn't buy into it. So thanks for all you do. I love your show and learn so much every day listening to you.
How old's your son now?
He is 19. He'll be 20 in a couple weeks, and he's a college football player now. And he's been injured for the last 2 seasons, so I'm believing that next fall he will be out there and throwing the ball. So we're excited.
You tell him that just the fact that he stood like that and had the wherewithal, the courage, and the common sense tells me I need him at Patriot Academy. So tell him to go to patriotacademy.com and think about coming and spending a few days with me at a state capitol. Let's see, you're in Virginia, so the closest one to you is Dover, Delaware. We'll be in Dover in July. And he would have a great time there, or come to Texas and come to the Patriot Academy campus and spend a whole week with me. He'd love that too. But anyway, tell him check out Patriot Academy. I'm looking for strong and courageous Joshua 1-9 type young men and women, and sounds like he is definitely one of those.
He is. He's got that magnet in his locker, in his football locker.
Does he really?
Oh,
that's it. Tell him he's accepted.
Yeah,
he just has to do the application.
I'll
tell the team. So what's his name? You don't have to give his full name, but say again? Cooper. Okay.
Cooper.
All right, Ashley. You tell Cooper to put on his application that Rick Green accepted him to Patriot Academy on the air live.
Okay. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
You bet. God bless you. Thanks for calling in. Man, I love that. I mean, think about it. You're 17. You got the whole school basically looking at you like you're the weirdo because you don't want to, take this injection. You got to fill out all this paperwork. You got to go home if somebody else gets the virus at your table. I mean, and I think one of the words Ashley might have been looking for there is it's illogical. It's illogical. Where's Spock from Star Trek when we need him? Illogical, Captain. That's illogical. I mean, herd immunity was what we needed, especially with young people like this. The kids weren't dying from COVID. I mean, that was the perfect way to get the herd immunity, was let the younger and the healthier, even those in their 20s and 30s, go out there and work. And anyway, the schools just went nuts, and it was all based on bad science. It was based on these hypothetical, even the contact tracing. And I started to say when she was searching for that word, I started to say Orwellian, and I said that a lot during the whole COVID thing. But I think it's actually more accurately Brave New World is probably it's my friend Chris Dunham talks about this, the comparison of the Orwellian versus Huxleyan worlds that those guys created in those novels, and it really is more of a Brave New World situation, and I think Chris is right about that. But anyway, just nuts. But thank you Donald Trump for trying for ending that insanity. And I think a lot of those people, man, I don't know if they will ever see the truth because they're so blinded by not just their, like I said, these experts that they look up to and worship, but they dug in so bad and they made their friends and family and community members and students and fellow teachers so miserable during all of that for them to now say, I'm sorry, and for them to now admit that they were wrong is so hard. I mean, they dug in, I think in their mind, on principle. They really believed they were going to be saving lives. And so at this point, it's really hard. When they do, I've seen some of it. I've seen some videos and seen some postings of people saying, hey, I was a jerk during that whole thing, and I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should not have done what I did. I shouldn't have used the power that I had in the way that I did. Frankly, I think a whole lot of stewardesses and stewards owe me an apology for the way they treat. And then some of you, I know you're not listening, you're in the air somewhere trying to do your job well. But those of you that were really cool about it and actually saw through the insanity, and you were nice to me when I didn't have my mask on, and you allowed me to eat one pistachio every 20 minutes and whatever else I was doing to keep from having to wear my mask. Thank you for being sane. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for covering for me with the crazy people across the aisle that wanted to have me thrown out of the plane in midair. Not really, but they acted like that. Anyway, so for those of you that saw through the nonsense from the beginning and treated your fellow human being the way you would want to be treated, thank you for being that way. For those of you that were little Hitlers all over the country or on the plane or in the classroom or whatever, I pray that you will find in your heart the ability to apologize, because I promise you'll get peace from it, And believe it or not, we're ready to forgive. I mean, in truth, you're already forgiven, but we're ready to actually give you forgiveness verbally, or your friends and family and loved ones will forgive you, and there'll be peace. And that's how you don't this whole thing of when all this stuff started finally coming to an end, and all of a sudden when the mandates and stuff started getting lifted, you had all these little Hitlers out there suddenly going, oh, we just need to come together, and we just need to give each other peace and room for making different decisions. Even now on the airplane, I still have to listen to the recording every time I get on the plane, and they say, if you're wearing a mask, blah 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 blah, and then they say to the rest of us, and please respect each other's decisions. Hey, where was that 4 years ago? Where was the respect for my decision 4 years ago, instead of the just craziness that they put us through? Yeah. Anyway, I think we can do that, but you gotta say I'm sorry. You gotta ask for forgiveness. You gotta truly be sorry for the way that you treated your brother or your cousin or your mother or father. I mean, we have people out there that did not let their parents see the grandkids for months and months and months at a time over all this craziness. So, apologize. Just say, I probably went too far. I was probably overboard, and I apologize. And can we forgive each other? And that's when the healing begins. That's the reason that God designed us to confess our sins one to another. You confess your sins, and that's how you get healed. I mean, God forgives you. Of course, you're forgiven when you ask God for forgiveness, but it's the confessing of the sin to each other where you feel that healing and where you feel that renewal. And anyway, I didn't mean to preach. I'm kind of getting off on this. Let's go back to the phones. David in Iowa. I'm sorry for ranting. This one, maybe I need to apologize for being a little too salty on some of this stuff. David, go ahead, brother. You're up next.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Rick. I just wanted to call and say I couldn't agree with you more about Zelensky. I'm not a political expert, but it just seems to me how many people have died in that war. 750,000 people have died. His track record as far as being somebody that you can trust is not very good, very corrupt before the war started. I don't agree with Putin invading. But, I don't think they should let him into NATO either. He's not trustworthy. He's probably going to grift more.
Yeah.
And if he was to do just that, I think Putin would say, okay, close enough. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it seems to me I would not trust him in NATO.
Well, David, your instincts are spot on, and you actually put your finger on the key issue. I mean, that was the whole thing all along, was not allowing Ukraine to join NATO, because then Russia really is threatened, not just by a local entity, but then the entire NATO force, and then they become, a kinetic enemy instead of, maybe a philosophical enemy at this point. And so, yeah, I think that's the problem is Zelensky. Well, frankly, let's get real about this. Hillary Clinton and Obama and Joe Biden created this monster and created this problem, and it's the same thing with the whole USAID thing. It's all of this stuff that we've been doing behind the scenes that created this problem. And anyway, I want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but man, I think you're spot on, and I think there's no way to trust the guy. And the worst thing we could do is put them into NATO. I totally disagree with even the concept of doing that. There's no benefit to us to doing that. It then draws us in, and frankly, I think that is Putin's red line. I think that's the requirement for that he's basically giving to Donald Trump. If I'm reading between the lines of some of the things that he and J.D. Vance have said, I think that's what has to be on the table. Is there's no NATO membership for Ukraine. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch that play out. Okay, let's head over we'll stick with the Davids of the world and come home to Texas here where I am. David in Texas. Go ahead, David, you're up next.
Hi, Rick. I know that the U.S. House is moving toward controlling the District of Columbia, and I've called my representative, Nathaniel Moran. I wish other people would call the representatives and ask the U.S. House to take over control, as is constitutional, because that place is our capital and it is out of control. What do you think?
I 100% agree with you, David. I think, well, first of all, you're exactly right. Constitutionally, Congress has authority over the District of Columbia. It's literally laid out in the Constitution, described and everything. never supposed to be a state, never should be a state. There's lots of great reasons for that. But the fact that we, and for those of you out there that have heard of this 1871 Incorporation Act and all of the rabbit hole nonsense that somehow that made the nation a corporation, it did not. It was literally the incorporation of D.C., just like you would any city charter. And it was, to David's point, our caller here, it was this debate over, okay, Congress has managed D.C. for all these years. Should we let it just be its own city and kind of manage its own affairs? And even then, they were supposed to report to a committee in Congress, and maybe they still do some sort of reporting. But I think David's spot on. Congress needs to step up and take back its constitutional authority, absolutely, completely take over D.C., run it through a committee and let Congress manage it, clean it up. You know, Greg Abbott did this in Texas to a certain extent in the legislature here years ago with the road system, came in and said, we're, you know, this city of Austin radical leftist mentality that if you don't build roads, nobody will come. It's this wacko environmental agenda that doesn't work. It creates more chaos and more congestion and worse for the environment. They're always wrong, no matter what. And so we you know, the state came in and built the roads, and then the city of Austin was doing all this Portland, Seattle stuff, and so, you know, I mean, you know, if you're a listener to this program, I'm often a critic of Greg Abbott and was a very strong critic of him during COVID. But he did this one right, and he said that, you know, this is our state's capital. This is we're turning it into a homeless encampment in the entire city. This has got to stop. And so, you know, the legislature and the governor did some things to help clean that up. I think, David, you're onto something that would be such a benefit to the whole country. I go to D.C. a lot, you know, not as much as I used to because of what you're talking about. It's become a cesspool, and I just don't enjoy going anymore. I'm hoping that turns around. I'm hoping what you're talking about happens. I think Congress should do this, make it once again an amazing place to go visit, and clean it up, and hopefully there's a lot of people that are going to be leaving town because you're cutting through a lot of the grift and you're cutting through a lot of these agencies that were never needed or weren't constitutional in the first place. So hopefully you can shrink it down to a manageable size and get back to it being a clean, nice city and a place that you want to go visit and learn about American history. I'd love to see that happen. I don't know if we can get this in before the break or not, but let's try it. Mark in Kentucky, you're up next, buddy. Go ahead. And we might carry over through the break if we have to, but go ahead, man.
Yes, Commander Green. It's so good to talk to you again, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So the question I have, simple question. I just tuned in and I heard you talking about some stuff. I had a great talk about just facing the fact, you know, waking up to reality. What is going on? What has gone on? And talking to people, bringing the message, discipling, we'll call it. So when I asked the pastor just yesterday, and you know, the excitement of the possibility of say Kash Patel heading up the FBI, and his comment back was, you know, he seems to be a little excited, but he goes, you know, I have my convictions on that, and it just kind of struck me. It's like, of course, what's the question? What convictions do you have? You know, what I want to know more. What is the resistance here for the leadership in the organized? I would go so far as to call it the institutionalized church. The misappropriation of when Jesus declared, "On this I will build my." Well, it really was the gathering, the gathering of people. Yeah, ecclesia. Yeah. And instead, we've institutionalized this, and those guys are like, man, how are we going to break down these walls?
Well, I tell you, Mark, I think with every one of those, even as specific as a guy like Kash Patel, and the appointment and the debate over that, you know, is to bring it home and say, don't you want pro-lifers to be able to save babies without the FBI breaking in their home at 5 o'clock in the morning, and having pastors. My pastor spends the first 5 minutes every Sunday commenting on the news and what's going on in D.C. and in this world. And that's the way the Patriot pastors were in the founding era, too. I think we got to get back to that. And you know, if your pastor is afraid to hit the issues of the day, you know, ask him, is the Lord not Lord over everything in our lives? And doesn't the Bible apply to everything in our lives? And I would love it if you would speak to biblical application to these things that are actually happening right now in our backyards. Got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
what we believe about the Bible is based on what we believe about its source.
The God Who Speaks, the award-winning documentary from the American Family Association, is now available in a special limited edition DVD set. This release includes a Sunday school curriculum and 2 hours of additional footage. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to get your copy today. thegodwhospeaks.org.
The American Family Association's mission is to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. Our goal is to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. We stand on the biblical truth that all human beings, including the unborn, are created in the image of God and are endowed by Him with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you for standing with the American Family Association. AFA Stream is your source for inspirational, informational, educational, and entertainment video content from American Family Association. You'll find documentaries like Culture Warrior, Don Wildmon, and the Battle for Decency.
Television in those days would be considered extremely mild as to what's available today.
You can access educational curriculum like Body of Evidence.
And there the Lord says, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them.
You'll find titles like Life is a Civil Right from the AFA Cultural Institute.
If you're Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece and you were tricked, my goodness, how many more were tricked?
Much of the content is free to everyone. Great Commission partners can see even more. And content is being added, so your options are increasing. Visit stream.afa.net and see what you like. AFA Stream, streaming video from American Family Association.
Imagine this thought running through your teen's brain. If mom and dad do everything for me, I don't have to do anything. Scary, isn't it? Hi, I'm Mark Gregston with Parenting Today's Teens. Parents naturally want to provide good things for their child, but if they never help them learn to become mature and independent, they'll become lazy and bored, and worse than that, they'll remain in a selfish state of dependence on their parents. So ask yourself a question. Are you doing everything for your teen? Are you still getting them out of bed in the morning? Do you clean their bathroom or do their laundry? Do you help too much on their homework? Remember that the only way a child develops the character trait of responsibility is by having someone give it to them.
Find books and other resources online at parentingtodaysteens.org. That's parentingtodaysteens.org.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Rick Green.
Welcome back to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with me for our final segment of the day. If you'd like to join us, it's 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's head over to Mississippi. George, you're up next, man. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, are you familiar with AmeriCorps?
Yes, sir. Not like I wasn't ever a part of it. I don't know a whole lot about how it runs, but kind of familiar with it, I should say.
Well, you're right there with me. You don't know much about it either. I just wondered if you heard about it. It's just another thing that I found where they try to hide waste in the budget, and you don't really know it. There's only one little place you can find it in it. And I could tell you about it, or do you have the ability to just pull up Google right now?
Probably could, but to go ahead and just tell me about it. And by the way, this is one of those things, I'm trying to remember when they started, but conceptually, I could get on board with the idea. Let's just talk principles for a second here, and conceptual. Like the idea that I think we ought to go back to having mandatory, or go to having mandatory service, but you have a choice between going military or something like AmeriCorps where you volunteer and you go clean up streets somewhere in the U.S. I'd rather it be instead of around the world. I think AmeriCorps is all around the world. Kids go and they go volunteer for a year or serve for a year or whatever. So conceptually, I could get behind the idea as an alternative to military service for those who aren't suited for military service, because I talk to a lot of generals who tell me, Rick, you don't want a mandatory one-year service because you want people that want to be there, and it'd be a pain for the military to sift through people that didn't want to be there. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm getting off of the subject, George. You want to talk about the waste at AmeriCorps. I kind of get off on the philosophy of whether or not an agency should even exist in the first place. Go ahead, bro.
Right. If anybody listening wants to, you can just pull up AmeriCorps budget. That's AmeriCorps budget. And if you look at that, it'll show the first thing, budget and performance plans. When you click onto that, it'll say fiscal year 2025 budget. And you come down just a little ways, and it says fiscal year 2025 AmeriCorps budget in brief. And it's underlined. And then when you see that, it says overview. It's only 3 paragraphs. And if you go to the very last paragraph and look at the very last sentence, as far as their money, it says the budget also includes $8 billion in mandatory funding to support an additional 50,000 American Climate Corps members annually by 2031, providing job training and service opportunities on a wide range of projects that tackle climate change.
Yeah,
so
it ought to be zeroed out completely, not reduced, zeroed out completely. There is zero that the federal government should be doing with regard to climate change anyway, because climate change is a natural phenomenon. But you're right. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that DOJ is finding, and it's buried sometimes in these agencies. But as you just proved to us, it's there in plain sight. It's right there for us to find. A lot of it is not. Like, that's why Elon and his wizards are having to go in and find it. But you just pointed out one that's huge, ton of money on completely unconstitutional expenditure. And certainly not the original vision of what AmeriCorps was even all about, as I understand it. So, man, great, George, great call. Absolutely needs to be zeroed out. And we'll have a link on our website today for people that want to go just look at the budget themselves. So, anyway, good call. Milked that one for all it was worth, I will say, bro. Okay, Kenneth in Texas, you're up next, man. Go ahead. And phone number, by the way, 888-589-8840. Kenneth, go ahead, man.
Good afternoon. I agree with you on 99.9% of what you're saying.
That's way too much, Kenneth. You need to disagree on at least 20%, bro, because if you're with me on 99.9, you're one crazy dude. Okay, go ahead. What's that 0.1% you want to disagree on?
Trust me. Anybody in Victoria will tell you I'm crazy.
I love civil discourse. So what are we going to disagree about today?
The last 3 county judges in Victoria, Texas, they spit twice before and after they say my name.
I love it.
Hillary Clinton and Obama did not start this new Cold War with Russia. They didn't help. But George W. Bush started this garbage.
Did he start the Ukraine part though? Was it the Bush administration? So this was prior to 2008. Then you're saying that some of this.
Yes, sir.
I thought they didn't.
Yes, sir.
I thought they didn't dethrone the Ukraine guy until like 2014 or something.
That is correct. But the whole thing was simmering years before that because of actions George W. Bush took.
What was it? What did he do? I don't remember. I'm not defending W, but what did he do?
He started talking about Georgia, and then he started talking about Ukraine, bringing them both into NATO.
Okay.
And he was preaching that line of garbage to anybody that would hear it, and Putin didn't like it. I don't blame him. Now Putin is he's a pretty rough character, but George W. Bush started talking about bringing Georgia and Ukraine into NATO way back when he was in office, and I said it. Mind your own business.
Yeah,
that's them. This is us. We don't have anything to do with them. And
he's literally
next
poking
thing you
the
know,
bear.
just a few years. Yes, sir. Poking that bear.
Yeah.
And you don't poke the Russian bear.
Right.
Russia is a very old culture. In some ways, it's a beautiful culture. it wasn't just but a few years ago. I invited, believe it or not once but twice, I invited Vladimir Putin to my house. I said, we'll sit out under my pecan orchard and drink tea, and we'll talk.
What did he say?
And I never heard back from him, and I didn't really expect to. But I have.
I want to
friends in
ride
Russia.
horses with Putin. I think that would be fun. Except he rides with his shirt off, and he's pretty stacked, and I would look very wimpy by comparison.
Yes, sir. I understand that. I understand that.
I think, Kenneth, I think you're onto something, man. I'm sorry, I got to get to another call here before we shut down here in just a few minutes. But I mean, I think you're right that it is not. We have to be very careful what we get engaged in. It always has to be a national interest, and even then, you got to do a cost-benefit analysis. There's a reason that George Washington told us to stay out of other countries' business. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go take care of things no matter where they are in the world if there's a threat to us. That's the reason for mark and reprisal in the Constitution. And so there's a time to certainly take care of things. And sometimes you got to go drain the swamp to keep from swatting mosquitoes, which is what, a lot of the war on radical Islamic terrorism is all about. And that was W as well. But I definitely think the whole Ukraine thing, I've never felt like our national interest was at stake there. I'm sure there are some who would say that it is, but it's always felt like it was something we shouldn't be involved in. All right, let's go to Gabriel in Virginia. All right, Gabriel, you're up next. Go ahead.
Well, I was asking about you. You were just talking about it. I'm not totally opposed to what you're saying about Ukraine joining NATO, but there are a lot of minerals in Ukraine, a lot of resources, and I guess I'm also not convinced that we benefit from Ukraine not joining NATO. And I appreciate what Trump's trying to do with getting the money back, but I guess I was just curious what the major benefit we would gain from Ukraine not joining NATO versus joining NATO. And wouldn't Ukraine joining NATO set us up for some sort of security? Because it's like, okay, guys, the era of land wars in Europe is over because Russia's not going to attack NATO. Now we can focus on business and all this other stuff versus just continuing to fight over Ukraine. Eventually, Ukraine's just going to look like Gaza. And 100 years from now, it's going to be like, okay, the 10th Ukraine war, we won't let it join NATO, but it doesn't want to be Russian. And,
Well, that's the thing is, and let me just be upfront. I am not a foreign policy expert. That is not my area of expertise. And these, 1,000-year-old relationships between some of these other countries and at one time the same country and all that, that's just not my area of expertise. But I do know enough about it to know, or know enough to be dangerous, that number one, the NATO issue. If we let them join NATO, then we are contractually bound through that commitment with NATO to actually then put boots on the ground and go in and defend them against Russia. And I just don't think that makes sense for us. I think that's foolish for us. When we know that is an absolute poking of the bear and absolutely what Russia is very much against, it's not so much what's the benefit of not letting them join, it's what would the benefit be to let them join and weigh that against the cost of them joining, which is huge in terms of poking the bear and the Russia, American-Russia relationships and the requirement then at that point for us to actually put our young men and women at risk in order to defend them. So that would be the way that I would respond to that one. I don't, long term and where it all goes, 100 years from now and what Ukraine ends up like. Listen, Russia and has much more interest in Ukraine's future than we do. I think that is, what you're saying about the almost like new European lines and that sort of thing. And I think actually that's part of what Trump is trying to do is keep us from footing the bill to be the world's police and stop having us everywhere on the planet. I frankly love, this is bringing it back to our continent, but I love the way Trump is positioning our relationship with Canada and saying, why in the world are we paying for all of these things and making sure that you're protected and not getting, us not getting any getting paid for that or getting any benefit from that. And so I think the mindset of America First permeates all of these decisions. And some of these, again, I readily admit are over my head or beyond my expertise, something I haven't looked closely at and studied. But I do think you can easily come back to the basic principle of America First and saying that's the proper mindset of any citizen of any country. You should put your country first. And therefore you should say, how does this policy benefit the United States, or how is this policy to the detriment of the United States? And obviously there are exceptions, and obviously there are atrocities that happen that you have to weigh whether or not this is so bad that as a benevolent nation we're willing to spend some of our treasure to help. I mean, we do that when there's a tsunami somewhere. We do that when there's a lot of things where we step in. I think the problem is we've allowed ourselves to step into everything. We've stopped doing the cost-benefit analysis, and we just see a problem, or we see a pain, or we see those kind of things, and we say we're going to go help, and we don't weigh what is that actually costing us, and what are the other options for helping, and is it always our place? Can we afford to always help? I mean, look, there are people in need within 5 miles of everyone listening to this program right now, and to me, I cannot physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually go meet the needs of everyone in need around me. And as a nation, it's the same way. We cannot fight everybody's war. We cannot fund everybody's war. We cannot fund and fight every disease on the planet and go solve every problem out there. And that's why the whole thing with the National Institutes of Health and the CDC and the things that Fauci was doing to fund the Wuhan lab and fund all this research, and that's why you end up in these problems, and you end up creating more problems because you're getting out over your skis. You're getting out beyond what you can do as a nation. And we frankly have gotten so big that we haven't mined the store. We haven't allowed ourselves to do the things we can do well and say no to the things that we could go do, but we just can't do them well. And I think that's why America First, just as a principle and a mindset, helps us reset the table and say what's most important. What are the things that we can do as a nation that will make the most difference, that will keep us healthy first, which we're not. We're not healthy. We're not healthy physically, which is the whole RFK thing I love. We're not healthy financially, which is the whole Elon Musk thing that I love. Hopefully going to reset that course. And we're not healthy in terms of just being able to do these cost-benefit analysis. I think Trump does a pretty good job at that. I think that's why he's been so successful his whole life. He's able to look at the cost and the benefit and make a good decision on whether or not moving forward or saying, no, that's not something we want to be a part of, makes sense. And I think he's doing that for the nation. I think that's why we stand a really good chance of becoming a healthy nation once again, making good decisions based on that cost-benefit analysis, and making better decisions about where our money goes, where our treasure and our blood, sweat, and tears, our investments, all of those things. So anyway, good stuff. Great calls, man. Thank you, everybody that called in today. Thank you for your fantastic input and questions, comments. No insults. Maybe we'll get some on Thursday. Hey, appreciate you being a part of the program. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You've been listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family